Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, welcome, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to this virtual edition of the Lightning Talks here at PAS Virtual Summit 2020. I hope you're enjoying the conference so far. My name is Eric Romero Cruz's Operations and Community Coordinator for PAS HQ. And before we get started, I would like to go over a couple items so that you know how to participate in today's session. So each speaker will present a 10-minute talk on a very different and specific topic. Once the speaker's time is up, I will introduce the next speaker, so on and so forth until we have all the speakers deliver their presentation. While you can submit your questions throughout the session, we will be saving all of those questions towards the end of the session. And once all the lightning talks are over, I will read those aloud to the speakers. Remember, when submitting your questions, please make sure you're doing so through the question pane and not through the discussion box. We want to make sure we're reading all those questions and we're not missing any of those in the discussion panel. When entering your questions, and so that we know which question is directed to which presenter, please input the first name of the speaker or the initial and then your question, and that will keep us organized throughout the Q&A at the end. Finally, don't forget to complete the session evaluation located in the same place where you joined this session in that pop-up window. And okay, let's get started here. I would like to introduce our very first speaker, Edward Pollack, who is a senior database administrator at Datto and is based in Albany, New York. So without further ado, Ed, take it away.
Thank you very much for having me and for being here today for this session. I'm going to do a little bit of intro stuff in the beginning about PAS Summit, and then I'll jump right in to our session on Jupyter Books, which are a fun new feature, not so new anymore, but a fun feature in Azure Data Studio. But before we get into that, first a note on PAS. PAS has a lot. I personally run a SQL Saturday. I'm a member of a local group. I do a lot of things with PAS. PAS is wonderful. There's immense amounts of information out there, ways to volunteer, ways to learn, ways to share, ways to advance your career. So please check out everything PAS has to offer. They're a pretty amazing organization with a very wonderful community of people that are very, very helpful. So check out PAS. They're wonderful. You're here. You probably already think they're pretty cool. Next, session evaluations are very important. Please evaluate us, the speakers, on everything we say and do, on the content of our sessions, and on the format. Evaluate everything. Feedback is very, very helpful. It makes us all better at what we do. So please submit session evaluations, and I think there's a raffle to win some stuff. So on top of evaluating us and helping us, you might win something too, which is also pretty cool. So who am I? Ed Pollack, Senior Database Administrator at Datto. I'm in Albany, New York. I have my family here, keeping toys strewn all about the living room. Author of a couple books, writing lots of articles, but you're not here to hear about me. We only have 10 minutes. So without further ado, here's the agenda. And the agenda says we're going to go over to Jupyter Books and demo this thing. So for anybody who does not know what Jupyter Books are, or SQL Notebooks are the Microsoft implementation of Jupyter Books. They're basically a documentation, code sharing, and presentation software built into Azure Data Studio. This is pretty cool. This feature was dropped pretty quietly initially, and it's become very famous amongst many people who love using it for a lot of purposes. It can be used for documentation. If you want to just write up a whole bunch of docs and have some nice markup and code, you can do that. It's great for collaboration. Like, hey, I have some stuff I want to share with you. Here it is in a beautiful format. And it can be used to present as well. If you have a lot of different types of things you want in one place, it's really nice to have it in one screen rather than many. Jupyter Notebooks is actually a more general open source product that has many different features built into it. SQL Notebooks is their own implementation of it. SQL Notebooks overall has less overall features, but if you're doing anything in the Microsoft world, it's way easier, way better, and very convenient because it's built into Azure Data Studio. Notebooks support all different kinds of text, markup, and HTML, so you can make kind of pretty images and pictures and text in all different formats. It also supports code, and that's where it gets fun. You can connect and use PowerShell, R, T-SQL, and there's many other ones too. You can get extensions that give you access to more types of code that you can put into it. And so notebooks support a variety of different code, and the code is what makes it fun. So why do we care? Why is this cool? Why not just keep using PowerPoint with other stuff like Management Studio or RStudio or other platforms like Azure? Well, the big nice thing about this is you can combine it all into one place. combining code into one place is really, really wonderful for just any kind of collaborative effort because you're not all tabbing between screens in a presentation. You're not switching between files. It's very smooth, it's ordered, and it's easy to follow. And because it can support multiple kernels, you in theory could have code in different languages all in one place, which again, it's convenient. And PowerPoint is a nice utility. It's great if you have just presentation and want to go from slide to slide as a reference. But when you have more than PowerPoint, it becomes a hassle. And at least for me, I've run into issues in the video world where like the AV doesn't quite work when you alt tab between 5 different things, or you lose focus, or you alt tab to the wrong window. So for presentation, having one window instead of many is really, really nice. And it's really great for documenting a process or a feature or maintenance or some kind of troubleshooting step because it involves code and you can describe it all in one place, because putting your code in Management Studio or in Visual Studio and then having comments, comments aren't really markup and comments are kind of hard to read. And so comments aren't really the ideal way to support something with documentation. So you're looking at an Azure Data Studio SQL notebook right now. This is it right here. And each of these is a block. You can add more cells very easily. Code, text. And when you add it, it'll just pop in wherever you are and you're done. You can take and reorder these blocks however you wish. You can delete them and do other various things with them. So manipulating the data in here is very, very easy. You can have lists, you can have images, you can have markup, you can have bold, italics, headers. It's very similar to like a scaled down Word document in many ways, kind of cross the web page. So for all your basic documentation needs, linking needs, links like this to go to a web page or a different document, you can do it very easily. And that's very, very convenient. So in terms of just visual layout, you can make it really pretty and you can make the text as big or as small as you want. It's really up to you how you want to document your information. But the markup is only the first piece of it. The markup is how you describe what you're doing and how to do it and make it look pretty. But really the meat of it that makes it awesome is sharing. And so let's say I want to share some code with a team or at a presentation. I want to say, hey, what's this? Well, hey, here's some text that describes the code. This code returns all baseball games played in a date. Well, here's my baseball stats database, and here's the code. And if I hit play, I get results back. Wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. There's the results. Done. And so it's a very nice way of integrating not just markup, but code and then result sets all in one place. And that's pretty cool. Results are an additional form of feedback that weren't otherwise available. Plus the output is here too. So if you got statistics.io on or print output or things like that, you get that too. So a lot of different things get merged into one screen, which is pretty awesome in terms of convenience. And then again, when I'm done with this, I can say, hey, clear the results, gone, or expand or contract all the cells, done. So you can manage kind of the visual layout of your code very easily as you go along. And then I can say, hey, I'm on to the next demo, expand it. There's my code. Hey, this code here, look at all the runs scored for a team for home and away for a given season. Go. Well, there I go. I run the code, connects to the database. There are my results. So this is a very cool way to share code, markup, but also the output and the results. Now I have 4 different things just in Management Studio alone that otherwise would have been different windows, different frames of reference, tabbing over back and forth, because in Management Studio, the output, the execution plans, the results, all those different things are different screens, different tabs, but here they can all be in one place, and one place is really nice. What other kinds of things can we do? I hinted at collaboration. This is more than a presentation tool, and honestly, SQL Notebooks isn't really the optimal presentation tool. It's good, but it's not perfect. There are other presentation tools that are also very good out there. But the power here is that it can be used for other things like collaboration. For example, let's say I wanted to create a process document. Like, hey, here's how to do a process. You're an operator. You need a process to restore a database to a test environment. How do I do it? Well, here's my heading. Here's my markup telling you exactly what to do, step by step. Do this, do this, do this, do this. And there it goes. And then notes like, hey, this is also automated too, if you want to do the automated process. So, this gives you a great opportunity to see, here's the code to execute a process. Here's a step-by-step on how it works. And then here's some notes on it. Like, hey, by the way, you can go here to this little link, visit some central documentation with more information on the infrastructure. So you can create a process document, and the process document can have all the things in one place, details, notes, code, results, everything, all in one place. And you can update it as a live document. These can be living documents that you update and manage over time. And so when somebody needs to know how to do something, they can go to the page. Where it becomes very useful is, let's say you're an operator on call somewhere, or you manage any kind of operations kind of things where it involves you getting up at 2 in the morning to deal with something. Well, I really want a good process doc, because if I was an operator and getting up late at night doing something, I don't want to think. I want something that step by step walks me through it. It's up to date, it works, and there it is. There's the code. I don't have to do anything but just follow the code along and do the thing. That's perfect. But it's more than just operations. We can use SQL notebooks to detail code changes. For example, if you manage code and code changes often, you can have that be dumped into SQL notebooks as a document. For example, here's a bug fix. We fixed some data load with a table that was causing a process to fail. Well, here's all the detail, and here's the code involved in the change. And there's the is null. I could highlight it if I want to and put additional comments and notes in, but there it is. And then there's the details of it, and you can test it if you want. Done. So if you want to update a code change or make notes on it or comment on it or pass it back and forth between developers as a way to think about something and brainstorm a problem, not necessarily commit changes, that's what source control is for, but for discussion and for thinking about a change and for doing it, this is a great way to pass back and forth ideas and ultimately arrive at a solution. So a collaboration is very useful here. So we have in many ways a way to present, many ways to document, and collaborate with other people. One additional thing here, which this is so perfect, because you can use SQL notebooks for monitoring and troubleshooting. You can create a whole notebook whose purpose is monitor and troubleshoot an app, monitor and troubleshoot a SQL server or an application or a page or whatever. And the beautiful piece here is Glenn Berry has an entire session tomorrow morning on this exact topic, 75 minutes on DMVs and Jupyter notebooks all in one. So if you like this and this interests you, you want to improve your monitoring and troubleshooting through the SQL server, check out that session because it's perfect. It fits right into this. And then you can do things like this, for example. I can say, hey, how do I validate missing indexes? Well, hey, if you're interested in that, here it is. Here's some code that does the thing. You can run it and it'll run, it'll return results. And hey, there's some missing indexes in order of value in terms of impact. Or hey, what SQL Server agent jobs are currently running? Run it, done, nothing right now. My server is kind of boring. But hey, if you had things running, they pop up in the list here. Or something simple like here's a dbcc command to check for open transactions. Again, all these are very simple, but you can create a whole dashboard basically for your operators, for your users, for your developers that says, hey, if there's a problem right now, or you want to look into something or troubleshoot something, here's all the wonderful queries to use to do it. So to kind of summarize all this information, SQL Notebooks is built into Azure Data Studio. Azure Data Studio is kind of the additional product for Azure based on SQL Server Management Studio and other various products similar to it. Built into it is this. You can use it to document, you can use it to present, you can use it to troubleshoot, you can use it to monitor, and do all kinds of cool things all in one place. And so for many purposes, this is very, very, very convenient. I've used it in many places, at work, at home, professionally. It's cool. It saves a lot of trouble. It saves going back and forth in Windows. So again, highly useful app. Recommend using it, checking it out. If you have any questions on it, feel free to ask me or anybody else at Past Summit who happens to use this feature and talk about it. And with that, I will hand it back to Eric and to hand it off to the next presenter. Thank you.
Ed, thank you so much. That was a very lightning talk there. Great job. Great job. You covered a lot in perfect timing as well. Coming up next, everyone, we got Christine Assaf, People Solutions Consultant for HR Tech. Christine, the floor is all yours. Sorry, Christine, I believe you're still muted.
Okay, there we go.
Perfect.
Of course, it has to happen at least once.
Exactly.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for being here today and for having me today. We're going to talk today about something I like to call the human in the machine, which is all about preserving human elements in an increasingly tech-heavy and distant kind of world. So first, a bit about me. My name is Christine Assaf. I'm a people strategy consultant, and you can find my website on hrtact.com, or you can find me on Twitter at hrtact, where I like to rant and rave about HR things. And I'm a specialist in training and development. I have over 15 years of HR experience and over 20 years of training experience, and I'm a frequent speaker at SQL Saturdays all across the country. And I'm about 4 classes away actually from getting my master's in IO psychology. And if you don't know what IO psychology is, that's the study of people and groups in the workplace to figure out how to motivate them and increase performance. So basically human behavior as it relates to work. So let's jump in. We crave human interaction. An Accenture report that was published in 2016 talked about the disconnect that digital has caused in customer engagement. Accenture called for their companies to recalibrate their investments between traditional and emerging digital channels. That 83% of consumers said that they prefer dealing with humans rather than digital channels. So they call for a mixture of human and digital. They found that digitally native consumers crave personal communication, that humans are fed up with what researchers are calling humanless customer service. And here's the thing, we know that it's better. Today's state of things is a tremendous reflection of that. Physical touch and in-person communication is still craved by humans. From a 2014 Chicago School of Business study, research on shaking hands showed that it causes the centers of the brain associated with rewards to activate. People feel more comfortable when they touch each other, and they're more open to discussion, they're cooperative, they're more willing to negotiate than when they don't shake hands. Also, shaking hands shows that people are less likely to lie to each other. There's another study that's wildly referenced, it's from 1971, on personal communication, and you've probably heard it over and over again, but it says that 7% of everything of communication is words, but the 93% of it is tone and expression, giving credence to the phrase that it's not what you say, but how you say it. And in another study in 2004, it looked at what's called the mirror neuron system. And this mirror neuron system tells us that when you see a person take an action, your brain fires its neurons associated with that same action. So essentially, when someone smiles at us, we tend to smile back. Also, we pay attention more when we're closer together. In a 2010 research paper, they found that people pay better attention in face-to-face meetings than they do when they're on the phone or when they're in video conferences. And current emergent research from just 2020 is showing the exact same tendencies. The thing is, innovations did not and will not change the fundamental aspects of human behavior. Nicholas Christakis is a Yale sociologist, and he calls this phenomenon the social suite, which is a crucial set of capacities that we have evolved over hundreds and thousands of years. And they include things like love, friendship, cooperation, and teaching. These traits remain remarkably consistent throughout the world, and regardless of whether or not it's an urban or rural environment, and whether or not that environment uses modern technology. But there's no turning back. As Paul Jones here, a professor of information science at UNC Chapel Hill coins it, humans need tools. Humans need and want augmentation. And as the saying goes, first we make our tools, and then our tools form us. The benefits of technology outweigh the loss of human interaction. Digital links people together who could not otherwise be linked. It creates connection like it never did before. It provides for empowerment, education, advancement in communities, and for people who lack that access to those educational opportunities due to location. But the introduction of technology is not the problem. For generations, children grew up with new inventions like automobiles and radios and televisions. And with each wave of technology, people worried. What's uniquely different this time, however, is that these devices crowd out opportunities for critical social human interaction. So what are we getting wrong? Well, first, we're not viewing digital through various lenses, especially as it concerns diversity. We've seen research that some AI systems perpetuate current faults of human behavior, like racism, sexism, bigotry. These norms exist in certain environments, and AI tends to mimic these environments based upon our human programming. Secondly, and frankly, we're capitalizing on it. We're getting greedy. We design these digital systems, these platforms and devices to create dopamine dosing addiction. Judith Donath wrote in her book, The Social Machine, keeping people in a continual state of anxiety, anger, fear, or just haunted by the inescapable nagging sense that everyone else is better off than they are can be very profitable. Third, as we've seen so prominently recently, we've opened ourselves up to digital distrust, not being able to know if what we see or what we read is real or not. We've created divisiveness, propaganda, and a lack of personal agency. Also, there's just a serious amount of information overload. It's like a fire hose. We can't turn it off while we're at a stoplight, while we're in the bathroom, while we're waiting for grocery delivery that we just ordered on our phone. We're constantly connected. And lastly, it's invasive. There's a need for cybersecurity because our personal information is being bought and sold over and over again. We lack privacy more than we ever did before. So how can we improve? We need to reimagine systems that center human elements in a digital world, like in the new tech of AI, VR, augmented reality, mixed reality, as AI is made to look and act like us and to ingratiate deeply into our lives. That may change how loving, how kind, and how friendly we are. But humans make mistakes. We always have. A Yale experiment had a robot helping lay down railroad tracks in a virtual world. He would apologize when he was clumsy or made a mistake. And then the researchers compared that with a control group that had a bland, non-apologizing, non-mistake-making robot. And the entire group of humans were more consoling and comforting to each other and to the robot than to the non-apologizing robot. And they also showed better interaction with each other when they had a mistake-making robot with them. In another experiment, 4,000 humans were divided into social network groups and given simple color chart tasks. But the bots were added into the mix, unbeknownst to the humans. The human groups with mistake-prone bots consistently outperformed those groups that had perfect bots that didn't make mistakes. So while we're using machines to be more agile and functional and productive and increase accuracy, as AI emerges, we're seeing psychological research that shows that humans prefer and interact better with flawed machines. How else can we improve? Regulation. We need better standards, better code of conduct, better guidelines, and yes, better laws that encourage integrity in tech without limiting creativity and advancement. We still argue over the biggest philosophical question of all: who owns data? Assaf Rafaeli, which is a professor of the University of Haifa in Israel, says people are adaptive. In the long run, we are reasonable too. We will learn how to rein in the pitfalls, the threats, bad guys, and ill-meaning uses. These will continue to show up, but the march is towards progress. We also need formal education for all in digital literacy. We can't leave humans behind. We can do this by making tech open sourced, making software more transparent. Self-driving cars are going to be the next big thing in transportation automation, but we have over 3.5 million professional card-carrying drivers in the US alone. Are we going to leave them careerless like we did our horse-drawn carriage drivers or our factory workers in Detroit? And lastly, let's calibrate our expectations. Evolution takes time. As humans, we have evolved as interpersonal, social creatures, so we must re-evolve. Technology should enhance, not replace our human interactions. Let's not let technology crowd out our human interaction, but to augment it, to broaden it. Alex Beard is an artist from New Orleans, who's also an educator, who wrote a book called Natural Born Learners. And it's about transformation of education and the future of learning. And here's what he said, and I'll leave you with this. If robots do take the jobs, it's our human qualities in the end that will count perhaps the greatest impact of technology may paradoxically be that it pushes us towards being more human. Thank you very
Christine,
much.
thank you so much. That was great. And that experiment that you were explaining about the robot, it's quite impressive. Okay, let's get going with our next speaker. We have Indira Bandari. Indira, BI and data lead at Clint William Health. So, Indira, all yours. Indira, can you hear us, Indira? I think you're muted.
I'm not able to turn on my video. Just hold on.
No worries. And I see a couple questions coming through. So yes, don't forget to put those questions in the question box. Also, the discussion is going on, which is great. But yeah, don't get confused. Put your questions in the question pane and not in the discussion one, so we are sure that we're getting to those questions at the end. Okay, it looks like Indira is ready to go. Perfect, Indira, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Indira Bandari, and I'm a Microsoft MVP. And I work in Clan William Health sector. Today, I'm going to share with you my 5 Power Query hidden treasures that will improve your productivity. You must have listened to the earlier speakers about PASS. PASS is amazing. And also session evaluation is very important for the speakers as well as PASS. So please don't forget to do the session evaluation. And today I'm going to cover these 5 tips, how to grab one column and make it a table, add an emoji for a table name, copy queries between Power BI and Excel, sort parameters in Power Query, and also how to do cancel refresh in Power Query, which is not very intuitive. Okay, so let's go. I have given the in the slides. I have given all the tips. So how to grab one column as a list. So just add a new blank query and then make sure you have, the trick here is make sure you have 2 square brackets rather than just 1 square bracket. Let's see how that goes. So I'm just going to share my Power Query here. So here I have, this is, I have a data set from Google Sheet. This is a quiz that I have created recently. So I'm using that. Here are the responses from the quiz. We did a photo challenge. So all the responses are who is in the photo. And I have an answers sheet as well. So what I want to do is I want to see who all have responded. So this one, I want to create a new table. So to do that, I'm just going to add new query and blank query. And here in here, I'm going to type the table name. Table name is responses. And I will go, when you start putting one bracket, the other bracket comes up, and I will again start putting the next bracket, and then I will give it as names and close the bracket and say enter. Okay, it might be name, not names. Okay. See, you have the names here. So that column is replicated here. So that is the how to grab just one column. Otherwise, you will go roundabout. You will take a reference and then remove columns. So you don't need to do that. It's just a quick typing of the table name with the column name, including the 2 brackets. Okay, let's go to the next one. The next one is add an emoji to a table. So if you type Windows key and dot key simultaneously, you will get all the emojis. Let's see how that is. So if I want to rename, let's say this query, I'll just rename it to names, and I want to add an emoji here. So I will just type Windows key and dot key, and you have all the emojis. You can choose whatever emoji you want to add to that. So I'm just going to add a rose. So I have added a couple of roses. So that's how you can do the emojis. If you go into the next tip, copy queries between Power BI and Excel. Oh, my Excel is not open. I'm just going to open Excel. Okay. I'm going to show you how easy it is to copy queries between Power BI and Excel. So here I am in Power Query, and I want to copy these two tables into Excel. So I'll just hold Shift and then right click and copy from here, from the queries pane here, and then go back into Excel and go into data here. Yeah, data. And here there is queries and connections. So here the queries and connections tab opens. You can just right click here and then paste. It will take a little bit of time, but it loads. You can see the responses loading and also answers loading. And then ultimately you will see both the tables. Let's just give a, yeah, if you are prompted with privacy levels, you can ignore the privacy, or you can give the, mostly you will ignore because it's your data, so you can do that. And once you ignore, yeah, see, this is my answers table, and that's my responses table. See, this is my responses table and that's my answers table. So it's that easy to copy and paste if you have the model ready, queries ready in Power Query. Okay, next comes sort parameters in Power Query. Okay, for example, sometimes you have a lot of parameters and you want them to be sorted. At the moment, we'll see how the parameters are. I have two parameters here, start date and end date. And if I go manage parameters and start to change the parameters, I get end date first, but that's not ideal. I need to get start date first and then end date, because sometimes people are used to start date and end date rather than end date and start date. So if I try and drag here, it is not happening here. So for that to sort these parameters, what you need to do is drag it here in Power Query query pane itself. So I want the start date to appear first, so I'm dragging it first. Now when you see, if you go to manage parameters and parameters, start date will appear, and then you can start changing it, and then you can go to the end date and change it and then give the parameters. So you can't change it in the manage parameters window, but we can change it in the Power Query window. And my last step is cancel refresh. So for canceling refresh in Power BI, it's not very intuitive, because if you try and cancel refresh, try and look at cancel refresh, it is not highlighted. So you may think that the refresh, cancel refresh does not work. But when you just try and refresh, I'm just refreshing my data set now. So I'm just refreshing. And then once you start refreshing, then the cancel refresh will highlight, and then I have canceled the refresh. So that way you can cancel the refresh. So I have canceled and it has canceled the refresh. So now it's refreshing. Yeah, it has refreshed. So that's my 5 tips. And thank you for listening to me. And if you want to contact me, my Twitter is Indira Bandari, and my email is indupriya9@yahoo.com, and my LinkedIn is Indira-Bandari. So that's me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Indira. Those are very good quick tips there. And also for everyone in the audience, if you wanted to get in touch with any of the speakers today or throughout the conference, remember, you can click on their bio and then you will have the buttons in there that will take you to either their Twitter handle, their LinkedIn profile, or you can directly email them. Okay, now let's move on quickly here with our next speaker, Mr. Martin Carney, lead consultant at Telstra Purple. I hope that I pronounced that correctly. So, Martin, all set?
Thanks, Eric. Little bit of an update. I just got a role change this week, so I'm now the Associate Capability Lead for Data at Telstra Purple here in Australia. I'm also a Data Platform MVP, MCT, and I run one of the past local groups here in Melbourne, Australia, as well as the SQL Saturday event here. So what I want to talk to you about and give you a quick tour around is Azure Data Explorer. And we want to look at how that fits into the Azure data ecosystem overall. And some examples of how you can ingest data into the platform, and a little bit of an introduction to the Coastal Query language, which it shares with some of the other Azure resources like Log Analytics and the Azure Resource Graph for querying. It's really well suited for large volumes of data, particularly the sort of partially structured stuff that you get from things like your application logs, IoT devices, and things like that. There's many data sources for Azure Data Explorer, and that ranges from things like managed pipelines, streaming data, things like event hubs, through to batch-based processes such as Azure Data Factory, and many other connections that are available either through the native connectors or through the various SDKs for the different programming languages that are available. Now, there is a bit of a recommendation around that for streaming data. The target is to get that in under 10 seconds. But when you get a rate that's a little bit more than 4 gigabytes an hour per table, then the recommendation is to move to a batch-based process. And that can then ingest between 100 megabyte and then 1 gig at a time. The whole platform is immensely scalable, both horizontally and vertically. You can have up to 1,000 VMs supporting your Data Explorer cluster. And those VMs can range from small machines with 1 core and 14 gig of RAM up to 16 cores and 128 gig of RAM as well. Now, where does it fit into the overall Azure data ecosystem? Well, it can provide an easy way for you to explore and model your data in an iterative ad hoc manner. So while you've got it there, you can browse through, you can try things, manipulate it in different ways, and try and find those new insights and build those new ML models on your data. And once you're satisfied with something there, then you can persist it into whatever your final process is, whether you're using some other data lake or big data analytical processing. There's a bit of a two-step process as it comes in. So from the various sources, it first of all comes into the data manager part of the engine. And that's where it does just your validation, your pre-processing, your data conversion, depending upon what your source data is, and getting it into the final tabular format. And then sets it up with the appropriate compression, encoding, indexing, etc., before it persists it out to storage. Once it's there in the storage engine, it's available for your querying. Natively, there's quite a number of data formats that it'll be able to ingest. From things like JSON, the various text formats, the big data formats like ORC and Parquet. The SOH SV is the native format used by Hive on HD Insight, and the W3C log file format, a standard format there that can pull in. So let's have a look at a simple ingestion process. And what I'm going to do here is pull through my metrics from the diagnostics in an Azure SQL database. I'm going to push that out to an event hub first of all. So we go ahead, we define that and just say, where is the event hub that we want to send that to? Once we have that in place, we can then come into Data Explorer. And the first thing we do is set up the objects we need in our database to allow that data to be come in from the event hub. Now, when we look into the Coastal Query language, one of the notations we'll see is this sort of dot instruction. And that's really the equivalent of our DDL type statements in SQL Server. So I'm going to create my final table here in a tabular format. So I've got the columns and the data types. We'll go ahead and create that. I now need an initial ingestion table because the data is coming in as JSON. So I use this dynamic data type to store that first of all. We're going to tell it that table is going to be streaming data, so we'll enable that part of it. And then the next bit we'll come on to is defining our mapping, which is really just giving us where is the point in our JSON object where we're going to start taking the data from. So we can check that out from earlier. We can look at it as it's coming in and work out what our structure is there. Once we have that, once we know where that entry point is, we can then use those references from there to extract out the actual column of values that we want to put into our final table. And the last part of the jigsaw here is really just bolting those together. So telling us that we have this initial table, we're going to run this function on that table whenever the data comes in, so that it then moves it out into our tabular format at the end. So that's prepared our database for ingestion. Now we go on to the actual data ingestion part of it, which is really straightforward. We can come in here, we just select the event hub as our data source type, give it a name so we can identify it. And then it's as simple as just selecting what our event hub is, from which particular namespace, and give it a consumer group. So we've got a unique connection area into that event hub. We don't have any compression coming through on there. And then when we target it, we put in initially our table, which had the dynamic data type in there. It's a JSON format, so we'll select that from the dropdown. And then we also tell it what mapping we used to give it that entry point into the JSON objects. That's it. It's as simple as that. We click go on there. And within a few minutes, that data will now be streaming into our Data Explorer engine. On the other side, how can I query it? Well, some really good options nowadays, as well as we've seen just through there with the Azure portal on the ADX Blade. Azure Data Studio on the Insiders edition now has a native Custo kernel, which means we don't have to mess about with installing anything else. It's just there. It's not fully baked in yet. There's still a couple of parts of that haven't quite been developed, that's still in the backlog. Another way around that, though, is to use the Python kernel, install the KQL magic, and as we saw earlier with notebooks, we can start to write our queries in there. On the consumption side, various visualization tools like Power BI, Grafana, Kibana, all hook in natively into Data Explorer, but it also exposes an ODBC connection, making it really, really flexible. So let's have a look at some examples within there. So our first part here, we're going to be looking at it from Azure Data Studio. So as I mentioned, we've now got a Custo kernel that we can use directly. We set that up, we just apply our connection in here. And the connection string is really straightforward. It's whatever you've named your cluster, dot the region where you've created it, dot custo.windows.net. So nice and straightforward and really easy to remember from there. The query language format starts off with the table name, first of all. That's our starting point into there. After we define which table we're starting from, we then use the pipe to indicate there's going to be further commands into that query. And then whatever the actual action is. So we're going to start with something nice and simple of just doing a count of the number of records in our table. So we run that and immediately see we've got over 100,000 records in there already. Other simple functions, things like take, which is like your equivalent of top so many in the SQL Server world. We can go ahead and run that. Not terribly useful at the moment, so let's look at something a little bit more complex. Extend gives us the equivalent of a calculated column. So we can use that to find what we want that column calculation to be. And here I'm extracting out part of the resource ID just to give me the database name. Summarize is like our group by. And the bin gives us a way of giving the sort of trim of the value down to the low end so that we can effectively bucketize things into our different segments here. So setting that up with a 15-minute timestamp, we can see in here that each of our entries are now 15 minutes apart, and it's given us the aggregate over that window. So effectively just like a windowing function in SQL Server terms. Okay, so other straightforward ones. Let me have a look at the different metrics that are available. So these are the bits I've collected in my table. What if I only want to look at those ones that are prefixed DTU? Well, I can define a dynamic table here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and create that and just say, these are the values I want in my table. And then I can use a join. In the same way we can join between tables in SQL, we can join between tables here in Data Explorer. So I'm going to join that back to effectively filter out my initial table to just those 3 metrics. So as we can see now, we've only got the DTU prefixed values coming through into our final table. Okay, so I'm going to jump across that back now to the portal again. As I mentioned, some of the functionality isn't fully baked in. And what I wanted to show you is that by default in the language, we don't have to just get a tabular output. We can go directly to a chart-based output. So again, my dynamic table this time is down to just a single value, just my DTU consumption percent. I'm going to have my join, and then at the end, I'm going to render that as a time chart. So let's go ahead and execute that one. And as we can see, immediately out it comes as a chart-based output. So really cool that way to immediately get our visualization on the data. We can change things into there. Again, another option I'm going to use is to bucketize my values up. So I'll take my initial parts. I'm going to say, for those, I'll use case statement and replace those into various buckets of the data there. Now, with the nature of that sample, it was pretty flat. It's not doing anything particularly exciting. So we get something that looks pretty much exactly the same in there. We can see for our 2 charts there that they're pretty much the same shape. And the last function I want to show you here is the go function. Again, another really, really useful one, which fits in based upon the time of execution of the query. And we'll go back in this example, give me everything for the last 15 minutes. So I'll run that, I get my last 15 minutes worth of data coming back from the table. That's my brief tour and exploration around Azure Data Explorer. Thank you for attending.
Amazing, Martin. Thank you so much for that. And now, before I introduce our next presenter, I would like to remind you to go check out the Expo Hall and visit our sponsors. Remember, we're also having this year our tradition here at PAS Summit, our Pass to Prizes. There's amazing prizes to be given away, such as the Amazon Echo, Apple AirPods, Microsoft Surface, laptop. So be sure to go visit the Expo Hall and be part of this. Now, with that, I would like to introduce our last but not least speaker, Mr. Johan Bratz, a lead solutions architect tuning today from Holland, Norway. So without any further ado, here you go. Johan,
Thank you.
The stage is all yours.
Thank you. Well, it's Oslo, Norway, but that's fine. We can take Holland as well. So, get the most bang for your SQL, for your books in Azure SQL. And yes, I am a lead solution architect at Capgemini in Norway. My agenda for today is take a little look at the different options that are available to us to select from in Azure on SQL databases. Looking at some considerations that you need to take into mind when you are selecting your service, and how to go through the different features in the different services to match up to your considerations. First of all, we have Azure SQL Database, then you have Azure SQL Managed Instance, and you have SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. And of course, you can always run up your own SQL server, manage or install that yourself as a fourth option if you want. SQL Database is a managed service. It is priced and featured through either DTU, which is the original version, which is kind of a black box combination of memory, compute, storage, and I/O. And then you have eCourse, which is a couple of years old, gives you more features or more control over the features that you can select. DTUs and eCourse are still both available when you are creating a SQL DB, but you are per default moved into eCourse. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. You have general purpose, which is, as I say, basic version and the cheapest version to go into. Underneath general purpose, you also have something called serverless, which is, again, Azure SQL database as a serverless functionality with autoplay, auto-stop, and so on. Then you have business critical. Again, as the name says, it is the most performant for your high availability, high speed databases. And you have hyperscale. And again, name is pretty prescriptive. It tells you that you can scale that out pretty far. You also have something called elastic pools, and elastic pools are a way to do databases, put them into a shared pool of resources. You only pay for a more limited set of resources instead of having resources per database. However, it can be a bit hard to use because it is shared. So if you have lots of database being queried at the same time, performance per database will be slower. But things you need to think about when you are picking your service is what size is your database? And with that, how much do you think it will grow in the next year or so? Do you need any functionality from on-prem? So, for instance, do you need cross-database queries? Do you run legacy apps that need to be supported with all the features that are in on-premise version? Do you have to run a SQL Server agent? Probably don't, but it's nice. Do you need to have full admin access on the OS level? And what are the usage patterns of your databases? Are they hit 24/7, so they need to be always on? Are they only hit during office hours? And if so, are you running a worldwide database version where you need to have databases close to the offices, but they are only active during that time zone's office hours? Service pools might actually be good. The elastic pools might actually be a good option for you there. And of course, if you're doing only ad hoc or very irregular usage, serverless SQL might be a good option. Then, what kind of a database are you running? Are you running your OLTP, so it supports an app, or is it a data warehouse kind of solution? I mean, yes, we do have SQL data warehouse / Azure Synapse, but that is another ball game because there are lots of other options available there as well. So I'm sticking to data warehousing in a regular SQL database. Do you run a lot of CPU intensive queries? Is that the main issue for you? Do you run a lot of in-memory optimized tables, or in other ways do you have a lot of memory usage? Or is IOPS an issue? Or you might not be interested in all of the above. You have price as your primary focus. SQL Server on Azure VMs is the only way to go if you need full compatibility with on-premise. If you need to quickly lift and shift to migrate your data. It supports all features, gives you full admin control, but you need to have personnel there to at least configure and maintain the VMs and the OS to a degree, though there are automatically backups, automatic patching, and so on available. Though it does support up to 64 terabytes of database. Managed instance is managed service, so there's no configuration or maintenance on the OS level or VMs. It has support for most on-premise instance level and database level capabilities, such as cross-database querying, managed virtual networks, of course, but it is only up to 8 terabytes of data. SQL database is a fully managed service, so there's no configuration or maintenance. It supports only database level capabilities and only the most up-to-speed ones. But if you're building a new app or you are redesigning your app anyways, that might be a good enough option for you. And because that is all the way up to 100 terabytes, it is the most scalable solution for you available and they are rolling out better virtual network capabilities within SQL DB as well. For their SQL database features, Azure SQL DB features, for IOPS, if that is very important to you, general purpose and hyperscale starts at 500. And as you add more vCores, it scales upwards. So general purpose stops at 20,000. Hyperscale goes all the way up to 204,800. Business critical starts at 5,000. That's 10 times the starting point. And the price is about twice the price of general purpose on the same level in database size and number of cores. Hyperscale is somewhere between those two, because hyperscale, where general purpose and business critical are predefined database sizes, hyperscale, you pay for what you use only. And if latency is important to you, business critical is down to 1 to 2 milliseconds, whereas general purpose is 2 to 10 milliseconds, and hyperscale is 1 to 10. I had a client that did heavy ETL loads where they deleted a lot of data before inserting, which means you're hitting the log all the time. There is, of course, also CPU involved, but the ETL time was 6 hours. And just by moving that from the DTU S9, so standard 9 level, over to business critical, I ended up with the same price. It was with only 2 vCores. So they saved like $10 per month. So not a lot to talk about, but the performance or the ETL time was cut in half. So it's only 3 hours instead of 6, just by doing that simple operation. So IOPS is nice featured. However, database sizes for business critical and general purpose is only 4 terabytes maximum, whereas hyperscale goes, as I mentioned, all the way up to 100 terabytes. So that's also something to think about. And since the more you increase your cores and data in hyperscale, the more IOPS you get. That's nice. And you can scale out general purpose not, but hyperscale, both read-only and failover replicas up to 4. And business critical, you get a read-only replica available to you. But for where hyperscale has a price of per replica, it doubles the price. Business critical is 1 replica included. And note that serverless has autopause, but only max 512 gigabyte database. And though you can swap between business critical and general purpose, you cannot swap down from hyperscale. That's a one-way street. So that was it. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Johan. And apologies for the wrong city there. I took it out from your profile. So maybe you might want to go and change that in your profile.
Yeah, I should.
Now, thank you so much for these amazing lightning talks. We will now be taking a couple of questions. I do have to remind you, we speakers, we do have to be quite brief and lightning in your answers. So I'm going to start here first, and I'm sure this is directed to Edward because I saw this coming through at the very beginning from Steve Jones. Ed, any thoughts on how to compare the results between 2 executions of a notebook? Is there any good way to get a notebook from someone and then run it yourself and look for differences in execution?
I have not done it before, and I think you could run the results from an execution there to a table, to a temp table, to a permanent table, to some place. Probably the easiest way to compare results would be to do that, is dump the results to a place and then do that in both and then compare afterwards. It's a little cumbersome. I find that Azure Data Studio is not quite, the SQL notebooks aren't quite as robust in terms of like being able to do anything you want with data when compared to Management Studio. It's probably what I would consider doing first before looking into other options.
Awesome. And I think this leads into the next question. If you can use text cells around code, do you do less comments in code or do you maintain both? Interested in how you view the 2 different techniques of conveying information.
I think the comments are still useful in code for pointing out, here's a thing right in the code on line 8 that you want to look at and understand what it means, like a number or metadata or something. But then I find the text is great for describing in general what something does, how to use it, the details that are very hard to convey in code comments. So I find that each has its own function and together they're very useful.
Awesome. Now we have another question from Kane. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Kane D. How do you get the SQL notebook? How do I get started? Link to where I can get started as well. I think Steve Jones have shared a couple of links in the discussion area, but Ed?
Yep, just simply download Azure Data Studio, and within there on the left side, you'll see what I kind of had before with the, you can create a brand new notebook, jump in and play. And it's pretty intuitive in terms of markup, but you can write code as well if you want in there. Pretty easy to get started, and the tutorials are pretty straightforward that Microsoft provides. So let Microsoft help you out, and it'll be pretty easy.
Awesome, thank you. Ed, now we have another question from Joshua Morgan. Why would you want an emoji as part of your column name? I mean, why not? It's fun, but I'll take it. I'll let, I think it's directed to Martin or Indira.
I think that was Indira's one.
Yeah. So sometimes when we want to add emoji for a calendar, like showing the calendar, so that I found that could be useful. Yeah, there won't be many use cases, but sometimes if you want to create some fun Power BI, then you can use the emojis.
Awesome, thank you, Indira. Now we have another one from Steve Jones. Do you think we need better frameworks? And sorry, I'm not sure who is this one directed to, but do you think we need better frameworks from government in their reimagining, specifically thinking of security, privacy, etc.?
I think that one's to me.
Awesome.
So yes, I would say, frankly, I think yes. The answer is yes. You know, for short answer, for long answer, I would be happy to discuss in a more robust way. There are some amazing technology leaders and gurus who are calling for that and thinking about that in an innovative way that doesn't limit tech. So we don't need to be scared of that. We just need to lean onto the people who are smart and can figure it out.
Thank you for that, Christine. I don't see any more questions. Well, I think I'm going to be wrapping this up. I want to thank every one of our presenters today for this amazing talks. You know, in my personal opinion, and I saw also someone else commenting in the discussion panel. Kudos to you all. I think this is such a hard format of presentation, you know, trying to go through all your content in like 10 minutes. It's crazy, but, you know, it does give an opportunity to everyone just come here and expose important subjects. And I know they were all very different, but very interesting topics. So with that, I want to thank all the speakers today. Thank you so much. It was really, really informative. And for everyone out there, our audience, I hope you continue to enjoy this PAS Virtual Summit. We have so many things. I know it's not the same as in person. We've tried our very best to bring that, you know, culture, that environment that we always we're used to at PAS Summit. So yeah, don't forget to visit the expo hall, go into the bubbles. Just have fun, guys. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Out for now.